The petrodollar secret is cracking. First of all, here is the assumption. Most people assume the US dollar reigns supreme, simply because America's economy is robust. This is partially true, but it barely scratches the surface. To understand the dollar's extraordinary global dominance, you have to trace it back. It leads back to a secret agreement forged in an oil-rich desert nation in the early 1970s, a deal economists call the petrodollar system. Consider the scale of this system. Global oil trade operates in staggering figures. In 2021 alone, OPEC generated over $561 billion. By 2025, the world was purchasing roughly $3 trillion worth of oil. And here's the remarkable part. Almost every barrel of oil was paid for in US dollars. This was no accident. It was a calculated geopolitical arrangement. Then came the break. Everything changed. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility into gold. This severed the last link between the dollar and any tangible asset. Before that moment, countries could exchange dollars for gold. But America had printed far more dollars than it could back. Other nations noticed this and began demanding their gold. Nixon shut the window. Suddenly, the dollar was backed by nothing except trust. And trust was rapidly eroding. Then came the 1973 oil crisis. OPEC cut supply. Prices quadrupled. Gas lines snaked across America. The system was under pressure. And the solution arrived, quietly. The solution was born in secret, setting the stage for decades of dominance that is now beginning to crack. The deal. Henry Kissinger, the then Secretary of State, traveled to Saudi Arabia with what must have sounded like an offer impossible to refuse. The message was clear: you are oil rich. That makes you a target for invasion. Sell your oil exclusively in US dollars. Invest your surplus in US Treasury bonds, and in return, America will guarantee your security. Saudi Arabia agreed in 1974. Within a year, other OPEC nations followed. The petrodollar system was born. The loop, the real genius, wasn't just pricing oil in dollars. It was what happened next. Oil-producing nations suddenly had more dollars than they could spend. So the surplus flowed back into the United States, into treasury bonds, banks, and financial markets. This became known as petrodollar recycling. 3 steps made the system unstoppable. First, every country needed dollars to buy oil. Second, oil exporters accumulated massive dollar reserves. Third, those dollars flowed back into the US economy. A seamless, self-reinforcing loop. For nearly 5 decades, no major power dared break it. Then came 2022. After Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States froze roughly $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. The US cut major banks from the SWIFT international payment system. Overnight, decades of savings became unreachable. The chilling message was unmistakable. This money is only yours, as long as the United States allows it. The world took notice. China reduced its US Treasury holdings from about $1.3 trillion in 2011 to roughly $684 billion by 2025. Japan also trimmed its holdings. Central banks began buying gold aggressively. In 2024 alone, over 1,000 tons were added. Gold's share of global reserves climbed to about 28%, the highest in decades. Russia and China expanded trade in local currencies. Brazil and China bypassed the dollar in trade deals. India began paying for oil in rupees. And then came the symbolic shift. Saudi Arabia signaled openness to accepting other currencies for oil. The shift, the structure hasn't collapsed, but it's shifting. The dollar still dominates, around 88% of foreign exchange transactions, and roughly half of global trade. But its share of global reserves has fallen, from about 72% in 2001 to under 57% by 2025, A slow decline, but a real one. There's another force building quietly: energy transition. With electric vehicles rising globally, at about 1 in 4 new cars sold, oil demand may gradually weaken. And if oil demand declines, so does forced demand for dollars. The petrodollar system still runs. There is no single replacement, not the euro, not the yuan, not gold, not crypto. But something has changed, for the first time in decades. The system has competition. Not one giant challenger, but 1,000 small ones. The petrodollar didn't rise overnight, and it won't fall overnight either. But now, the cracks are visible, and what happens next will shape global finance and economy for decades to come.